I'd like to turn it over to Manju.
Thank you so much. So thank you everyone for being so patient with all this scrambling on stage. Apparently it took like 11 goons to fix this, so thank you to all the goons. My talk is called Redefining the Hacker, and I just want to set expectations that it's actually more about inclusion and the way that we include people into the security job system, and what we think of when we are interviewing people and interviewing candidates, and what we think of when we think about expanding our teams. A little bit about me. I'm Manju. I am a security director at Oath, formerly Yahoo. I'm a woman, and I'm a security leader. I'm in a group called the Paranoids at a company called Oath, which is formerly Yahoo, like I said. There's an Oath recruiting booth right back there. And the Paranoids is a really large security team of almost over 180 people that have been with Yahoo and now are with AOL and Huffington Post and TechCrunch and Engadget and all those brands all together. And we're the security team that manages all those brands. People don't always know what Oath is, so I thought I'd explain that. I'm also an ambivert, meaning I need my downtime and I need my social time. So it takes a little bit of energy for me to be up here, but it also recharges me to be at conferences and hang around my friends and see you guys again, and girls. I'm also a night owl. Most people will know me as a severe night owl, and most of this content was created at 3 a.m. So I want to talk a little bit about the definition of a hacker. So this really surprised me. You know, ISC squared, which is something that many of us are members of, it had this definition in the Cybersecurity Lexicon. And it said that it's a slang term meaning a hostile human. So apparently we're all hostile humans. And it is a threat to IT systems and an IT security professional or a vulnerability researcher or an amateur security person. So I saw a lot of trigger words in there. I saw amateur, I saw hostile, I saw threat. And I don't think that really defines who we are as security professionals. And so I was really concerned that ISC is setting that out as their cybersecurity lexicon for newcomers. So then I went to Merriam-Webster and I said, okay, well, how do they define it? So there's a couple different definitions, and pretty much it's something around illegally gains access and tampers with information. Okay, that's a little bit more accurate, but I wouldn't necessarily say illegal all the time, everywhere. It's also not an accurate definition. Problem solving, I think I like that one. That's the most accurate one that I've seen. And so moving on, I also Googled it, and it says that a person who gains unauthorized access. It also references pirate, keylogger, cyberpunk, hacktivist, which, as we know, for many of us who've been in security for a while, are references to how some of the security research work and war driving and war dialing and phone phreaking and all of that stuff, the good old days of security, that's how it began. So I'm not satisfied with any of those definitions. And I don't think it correctly represents who we are as security people and who we are as security professionals. It also doesn't represent anything necessarily that all of these booths back here are recruiting for. So let's talk about what it actually means. Before we do that, let's play security person or not a security person. I'm going to challenge some of your biases here. Okay, this is a tinfoiled dude, and he, I guess, is a security person, right? Well, maybe not. He may just have an excess of tinfoil. So the next one is your standard RSA graphic. And this is what you see in every brochure. This is what you see when you Google any tech company that has any security services. This is what you see on the front page. Does that really accurately reflect everything about who we are and what we do? I don't think so. So let me challenge your assumptions. Is this a security person? Yeah. All right. I don't know, but Okay, what if I told you this person teaches Python security at the University of Bucharest? Is this a security person? What if I told you that she has had 54 submissions on HackerOne? Is this a security person? She is actually just sleeping at her desk and watching movies, so that is not, threw that in for, throw you off. Is this a security person? She's actually helped a complex identity management system get working in her company, and she's studying for her OSCP right now as you watch her. Is this a security person? Oh, somebody said HR, wow, okay. She is actually creating a Kanban board and remediating vulnerabilities in her company. So she is a security person. I just challenge you a little bit there on what your definition of a security person is and what they're supposed to look like and what they're supposed to be doing. Because they're not all crouched over in hoodies, hacking all the time. I recently went to a security conference called Day of Security, and I had the honor of sharing the stage with these lovely women. All of these women are security professionals, and many of them are very well known in the industry, tweet a lot, blog a lot, and publish books. Some of them are actually represented here today and will be represented throughout the conference and throughout the week. But that's an example of all the diversity that exists in the security industry that actually does not go recognized when we're recruiting and when we're hiring and when we're staffing. So a little bit about me. I'm going to tell you my personal story. I'm just kind of throw it out there. It's kind of personal. So I am Manju, like I said. My personal story is that I've been in security for about 20 years. I started in security for the government, and I started a couple years before 9/11. And as far as my background before that, we can go way back to my childhood. I immigrated to this country. So I was an immigrant, and many of the privileges that someone would have on breaking the law or testing their boundaries were not afforded to me when you're not a citizen. And I just want you to think about that for a second, because I have friends and colleagues and stuff like that who constantly brag about breaking stuff and hacking stuff and all that. And while that is absolutely a skill that's absolutely necessary, it's something that not everyone can do if they're actually worried about their very ability to stay in this country. Or any country. Before I actually joined security, I had 11 jobs, 11 different jobs. Nothing to do with computers, nothing to do with security. So that means that I had that many professions, that many different things that I was touching. And let's see, I was a dental assistant. I was a secretary. I was in food service. I was in sales. I was also working at a bank. I was doing many different things. And I think that one of the flaws in recruiting is that we want someone to be consistently in security. And that's not always true. And we don't really look for that opportunity of all the different things they would have been in and how that actually leads to them being in security. So I've seen a lot of breaches in my industry, and I've worked on a lot of breaches. The first breach I ever worked on in my career was actually 9/11. I did some investigations for that, and throughout my career I worked on things like TJX, worked on some other big brands. I also helped investigate the Yahoo breach. So breaches have been a consistent theme throughout my life. But I gotta ask, if we're being elitist about security people and what security people represent and what skills they're supposed to have, why do we have so many breaches? Right? So if we're so elitist and we have such special skills that no one else can have and no one else can be included in, why are we doing it wrong? Little reflection for you there. Another personal story I have is from a woman named Fatima. I met her at a security conference, a much smaller security conference years ago, and she told me her story. That's not actually her, just so you know, because she didn't want her photo used. But we take computers for granted. We see them every day and we touch them every day, and we think everyone has access to them. And we think everyone can learn to program and be a hacker, and everyone's Maslow's hierarchy is completely taken care of. And that's actually, I would want to challenge that a little bit. So we take computers for granted. She was born in Delhi, in the slums. She often didn't go to school. She sold vegetables in the market to help her parents. When she became a little bit older, she got a job as a cafeteria worker at a university. And she went on to try and study at night or whenever she had free time. She actually taught herself systems and programming. She also had the ability to try and read and all these things, literature and things that she was not afforded in the past. So that was her first hurdle, and then she taught herself systems. We don't realize that people are going through all those hurdles to get where they are. Fatima did not have the support of her parents at all. Her parents wanted her to get married at age 16. And she challenged them, and she went behind their back and guarded them from her other life, which was improving herself and getting into IT. So let's evaluate. You've heard a couple stories now, and let's see. Both of these people and many, many more out there gained unauthorized access. They were unsupported. They solved problems. They found a way to get in. They wanted more. They got more. And they retained access. That sounds pretty hackery to me. So I just wanted to challenge that and say, sometimes people have what it takes. They may not have security on their resume, but they have what it takes to start their career in security. Here's the problem. We are facing a shortage, right? Everywhere you go, you hear this stat that we're so understaffed. We also hear that 32% of companies take 6 months for them to fill a role, right? So in 2016, they said 100,000 jobs, and now they're way up to way more than that. They're predicting by 2022 there's going to be 1.8 million. I've even heard like 2.3 million, and all those stats waver a bit. What we can agree on is that there's a talent gap. And what we can agree on is that 11% of the security industry or less are women. I didn't go into the other diversity stats in this, but that is something that we do know. And we do know there's a massive shortage. So what are we doing to increase it? We need to let more people in. And we need to stop checking boxes. Right now, I've been on interviews where I've seen candidates get grilled against CISSP books. And that is not the way to get candidates in the door. I've also seen candidates that are assumed to have years of security experience for a junior role. And there's a misalignment there for the hiring manager, and it's up to the people who are recruiting and all that to set that expectation. But what we're expecting of our workforce is way too much for what we need. We need to fill these roles, and we need to be more inclusive. So what does it take? What does it take to be a security person? It takes attitude, perseverance, aptitude, intelligence, and passion. There's lots of studies out there that say that attitude and aptitude and passion are actually the most important things. Perseverance also is extremely important in our industry because it's always changing and we're always challenged. And intelligence. Intelligence, ironically, is the least of what we need, but that's the first thing that we test for. So we need to change that. Entrepreneur Magazine said that 80% of our success is based on our EQ and only 20% on our IQ, but we're testing only for the IQ. So what's holding us back? Why aren't we moving forward and filling all these positions? And why aren't we moving forward with hiring people in the right role? And why aren't we moving forward with giving people opportunity who've never before been in security? It's because of unconscious bias. So if you don't know what unconscious bias is, it's a prejudice that is a favor against one thing, person, or group compared to another, usually in a way that's considered unfair. Unconscious bias gives us mental shortcuts, preconceptions, and flawed logic. I don't want to go make this session about unconscious bias, but I really want you to go and read on it yourselves, because it's a big part of how we'll change the hiring for the security industry. Many big companies are actually doing talks and training on unconscious bias, and if your company does not have that, I would encourage you to ask your company to start having that. So then, this is developed over time, and it's subconscious, and you don't know you're doing it. So then how can you actually stop it? Because it's narrowing the pool that's getting hired, and it's narrowing the pool that are getting promoted. What you need to do is you need to slow down, and you need to examine your own biases. Potentially go through that training. You need to make uniform decisions in your process. Is every candidate being tested against the same thing? If it's a junior position, is the bar too high? Is it more important for you to get a flow of candidates in and potentially increase your hiring pipeline and your organizational growth than it is for you to have the ideal candidate? Another thing you can do is you can challenge yourself and others. You can challenge yourself by reflecting on your unconscious bias, and that exists in many forms. That exists in not just the people you interact with, but the way that you experience situations. In the workplace, there's actually 4 kinds of unconscious bias. There's affinity bias, which leads to favor people who are just like us. That's not going to win us any points on increasing staff. There's confirmation bias that leads us to search for and interpret for people and remember associations and perceptions. So-and-so reminded me of something that I experienced in the past, or so-and-so reminded me of a situation that was positive or negative. There was a halo effect. That's the third one, which is someone having done something great. So what happens in the halo effect is that one person in the organization says, this person's great, or someone in your peer group or affiliation say this person's great, and you just believe them, that they're great through association without judging on your own. And the fourth way is something called cloven hoof effect, which is generalize the negative aspects. In other words, someone tells you someone's awesome or horrible, and you generalize the horrible more. You generalize the negative more, and you remember that person with a negative association instead of a positive association. Those are all things that actually lead to unconscious bias and conscious bias in organizations and team growth. The thing that I would ask everyone to do is practice empathy and get to know people, get to know their stories, and get to know the deeper selves of the candidates they're interviewing. I want to bring something up called the Bravery Deficit. I don't know who's heard this. Who's heard this in the room? Okay, a couple of people have heard this. So Reshma Sajani, she's the founder of Girls Who Code, and just wanted to throw a tidbit out there while you're managing the unconscious bias. She did a study on girls and boys and the way they learn, and the way they speak up, and the way they volunteer for things. And it turns out it's not a question of ability. It's a question of the difference of how boys and girls approach challenges. So we're raising our girls to be perfect, and girls are driven to be perfect or have all the answers before they actually apply for a job or actually finish a task or actually finish a project. In the 3rd grade class, she asked girls to code, and she found that women, or girls in this case, were more likely to have a completely empty page. And when she looked a little deeper, the boys had lots of things on their page, and many of the girls had nothing. And she looked a little deeper, and it turns out if you backspace or undo a few times, the girls had written a bunch of stuff and undid it. And they didn't keep it on the screen because it wasn't perfect and they didn't have the answers. So what do? You need to socialize your women and your girls to the opposite for need for perfection. We're socialized from the beginning to think about perfection. And often they're afraid to raise their hand and ask for help when they could actually be on the path to achieving their task.
Sorry, I just walked in. Hopefully I'm allowed to ask a question. I'm a father of daughters, and I ask myself questions like this frequently. Why are girls, why do they need to be perfect? Is it because of that they're girls, or is it because of how we raise them, or is it because of societal pressures? Like, do you know? Is that out of the scope of your thought?
It's not out of the scope of my interest, but probably I'll get to that personally with you. I think it's a combination of all three of them. It's a combination of societal pressures and how we're raising them. Some would say it's also biology, but what you can do if you're raising young women and girls is to teach them that showing a little bit of effort or a little bit of work is better than showing perfect, and that perfection is the enemy. So you can teach them that at this age. They're also, the last bit on my point is that they're also very afraid to raise their hand. Often women and girls tend not to volunteer for things and tend not to speak up in class because they're afraid to raise their hand. And why? Because they don't have all the answers. And they're taught that if they don't have all the answers, they don't need to raise their hand. But we often see little boys raise their hands without all the answers. So last bit, here's a resume I want you to look at that doesn't struggle with bravery. Here's one person that doesn't struggle with perseverance or bravery. She has no humility, actually. She seems to have zero humility about her brilliance. And I wanted you to look at this resume somewhat comedically, but somewhat to challenge your own perceptions and your unconscious bias. Because if that person walked in and sat across from you for as a candidate or a role, you would have your unconscious bias before actually knowing her resume. And with that, I want to close out with a very inspirational quote from a really awesome security contributor, Tara Wheeler, on the topic of bravery and perseverance. If you aren't being rejected more than you're being accepted, you're not asking for enough. You're not reaching high enough and valuing yourself enough. Try new things. Ask people who scare you to help you, and begin to believe failing really is learning. If you're winning constantly, you're in a rut. So here's to failing and winning, and enjoying the rest of the conference.
I want to apologize that we started late for your presentation. Do you have a few moments to answer any questions?
Sure.
So any questions for Manju? Chris.
So it's an interesting observation. I do a lot of presenting, and I've noticed when I'm presenting, especially to an older audience, it's mostly the men who don't want to ask the questions. Because when they're older, you get a lot more of the peer group seems to not want to, they don't want to look as if they don't have enough knowledge. Their peer group, you know, I give presentations to groups of older women only, and I spend an hour to answering questions. It's fantastic. So it's almost if we reverse the bloody roles when we get older then. So it's just more of an observation than anything else. It just seems weird.
Maybe it's more to lose. More to lose if they've built a career, they've built a salary, and if they're shown to not know what they should know, they might lose their job.
Yeah, it just seems weird. It's almost just like the male testosterone. Oh, I want to be seen to be the perfect thing, and I don't want to be seen to not know the answer to skills in a different way when they get older. I don't know what it is. Yeah, it's just bullshit.
Yeah.
Could just be that you're tired. I'm feeling it. But no, I actually think that actually brings up a very good point. There's different contributors in the workforce at different stages and genders and identities through the security workforce. And I think that a B-Sides talk on ageism in tech or ageism in security or aging in security would be a great talk for next year. I'm saying find the right people to do the talk.
Hi, I'm from Brazil, and I run a hacking conference there, which is the biggest hacking conference in Latin America. But we still fight a lot with fewer women. It's very rare to find women that can go into a stage and give a speak with confidence in what they're saying, because it's not that we don't have good tech girls. It's just we do. They are rare because it's mostly men. But even the good ones, they are stage fright because hacking is kind of a new thing in Brazil. It doesn't have even 50 years there. So it's still a very toxic, very, very toxic community, like full of haters and trolls. So death threats are very common, even for me. That doesn't show up a lot because I'm an organizer. I don't go up in the stage. But we are trying to do the conference this year half. Have women speakers, have women workshops, have everything. And it's been really, really, really hard. I'm learning to give lectures so little girls can look at me in the stage and have the courage to do so as well. So I would really like to ask you some advice, since you are a woman in a stage in an international conference. What should I do to inspire those little girls?
That's a great question. I mean, I don't know enough about the security in Brazil, the culture there, but I think we and overall need to start holding sessions for kind of like a Toastmasters for women. Help them want to be present, help them want to be outward facing, help them want to be in that limelight and not be afraid. Again, it goes back to that perfection or bust. They feel like they have to be perfect in order to be up here.
It's also that presenting is a process. It is not, a lot of people think that presenting is a hand-picked situation, rather than understanding that there is researching the conference, there is understanding what you need to do about the submission process, and that is not something that is taught anywhere. There are more and more conferences that are actually providing workshops to do that. I'm actually presenting on that at Diana on Thursday. So because we realize that many...
The good news is we're making space. We're making space now over the last few years for people who didn't traditionally grow up in a computer science or tech background to be a part of the security community, because we're realizing security is much more than just tech. Josh, did you have a question?
I just want to say that the conference she's talking about is called RoadSec, and I've been to that conference, and it is an amazing conference. And I think that perhaps among the people in the room, we have maybe a stronger network than just her to reach out to the women that we know in the industry and encourage them to submit to that conference. I think that is a problem that we can help with in this very room, in this very day, by helping to publicize that that is a goal that they have. And that the conference is really great. And the security community and culture in Brazil, if you have not been, is amazing. Everyone there is so passionate about it. And you should go and see that for yourself. And we should encourage the women in security that we know to submit. So that's all I wanted to add. Thanks.
Great. We had one more question.
Is it on? I want to thank you so much. I'm getting emotional. And I don't usually. I want to thank you so much for what you had to share. And I want to thank you so much for being here. I have something I really want to say, and I hope it comes out okay. Let me get a handle here. I've been around a long time, and I'm angry. No, I'm angry that I'm emotional. Yeah, I'm going there. So I'm really impressed with these two young people that just spoke. I've avoided these for a long time. And, fuck this. One of the things that I want to say about security and our gender differences is that, I'm not good with words, and it's so hard for me to be behind the mic, but I really want to say this. One of the things that brought me here is my first B-Sides. Really glad to be here. Thank you so much. It took me quite a bit. I had to give a lot of free hugs to get my badge today, and I'm grateful for that. One of the things that I do want to say, as far as the wonderful stories that you shared, and a lot of the women that are up there, is this world can be violent. And our hacker community is no different. And I think one of the struggles that we as women face when we go up, and I'm not emotional because I'm weak, I'm emotional because I'm so passionate right now about what I'm about to say. When women speak up and we're afraid to, one, being perfect is one, but I think there's another underlying thing that we forget, is that when we speak up and someone disagrees with us, or if we make someone angry, in many cultures around the world, not just America, but many cultures around the world, what we face is not just dissociation or someone not hiring us. What we face is violence. We face death threats, we face harassment, we face so many juvenile things that I don't see my male counterparts in the past years have. I mean, they face some, but they handle it a little bit differently, and they're able to bring it down. But I think there's a fear-based thing that we also face, other than just not being perfect. And I think what it takes, and what I have seen in just the last few years, I'm so grateful for this. I'm not emotional because I'm weak, I'm just emotional because I'm so passionate about it, is all these women that are coming here and doing this, and especially women like this who say, I'm doing this, it's really hard. I can't, and I guess I wanted to ask, is 11% still, is that really the correct statistic for women in security right now? So that really bothers me, and I think if there's especially young people, one of the things that I'm so grateful for you bringing up, there was a young man that spoke over here. This new generation is amazing. The new male generation, these young guys, I have seen some of the most amazing ways that they will speak up, they will support, they will say things, and I think it's really there, and I just want to thank you for being part of the beginning. I really think this is the beginning of something really wonderful, and I'm glad to see it, and I'm glad to be here. And I face a lot of death threats. I face a lot of things, and I'm grateful for you to, I'm just grateful you're being here, and I just want to say if you're young and you're getting these kind of things, you are not alone. There are so many of us out there facing so many horrible things that some of this hacker culture can do. Just, you're not alone. And please keep coming back. Please keep presenting. And I hate the mic and I hate talking, but I force myself to do it because it's good for me. And thank you. Thank you for being here. Please keep coming back.